Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
That sounded like a lot of us, which is great, because we're here today to talk about is building a coalition to win quality, affordable health care for all. And we've got to make it clear to America that there are a lot of us who want to do exactly that. I'm Richard Kirsch. I'm the Executive Director of Citizen Action of New York and the Campaign Director for U.S. Action, which is a national public interest organization of affiliates around the country working for economic, social, racial, and environmental justice. And I'm also joined here today, I'm proud to say I'm the new co-chair of the steering committee of Healthcare for America Now, a new campaign that will be working for quality, affordable health care for everyone in our country. I'm joined by members of the campaign, including our two other steering committee co-chairs, Barbara Sofel from AFSCME and Khalid Pitts from SEIU. And I'll be introducing the other folks in a moment. And what I wanted to do is talk to you today about, we wanted to do really to talk to you about how we build a coalition and a campaign that will win quality, affordable health care for everyone in this nation. This is, of course, a monumental task, a task that our nation has failed at for more than 100 years, and yet it keeps like a phoenix rising back on the American political horizon. And, you know, it was about 16 years ago since the Clinton health care plan met its demise, actually 14 years ago since it actually met its demise. And people said, oh, politicians won't want to touch that again. It's too toxic. And yet here we are. It's an issue, if you listen to the Democratic debates, there have been half an hour, whole quarter sections of the debates just in health care. All the polling shows that, along with the economy in Iraq, health care is one of the top 3 issues that voters want addressed. And it's an issue that its urgency for our families, for our businesses, for our government is so great that we continue to realize that we have to address this if we're going to address the fundamental question of justice in this country. As Dr. King said, there is no greater injustice than injustice in health care. And so if we're going to move in creating a just society, we need to deal with justice in health care. We're going to hear today from 5 members of this new campaign, and I'll introduce them as we speak, but just so you know who else is up here is Marvin Randolph from Center for Community Change, John Arensmeyer from Small Business Majority, and Marcel Reed from ACORN. And what I want to do briefly is just set the tone for this, the strategy we're looking at, and then you'll hear from each of these groups on the major role they're going to play in that strategy. Our strategy is not just to build a campaign, but it's really to build a movement to win the implementation of health care for everybody in this nation, health care that meets a set of principles for what it means for quality, affordable health care for all. And we say building a movement, we understand that to win such an extraordinary, historic landmark improvement in social justice in this country, it can't just be what any one organization does. It can't be the typical campaign tactics that we all will employ. It's got to transcend that. There's got to be a sense of urgency. There's got to be a sense of vitality. And there's got to be a real connection to what goes on at the grassroots so that the energy and the enthusiasm and the urgency of this is made felt throughout the body politic by people at the grassroots. And so in doing this, we're looking to do something which is really interesting. We're trying to take what happens in a national issue campaign or national election campaign, where groups and people around the country come together and do concerted activities on a timeline with urgency to create change and to make it clear to the body politic that change is needed, but do it in a way that really respects what goes on in the grassroots, that listens to local voices, that has local voices direct the campaign in each area, and has so many different organizations working together, moving towards strategic unity. And by strategic unity, we mean we're all asking for basically the same thing, moving in the same direction, generally the same time, but doing with a lot of voices so the impact is that great. The campaign is organized, first of all, around a set of principles. And the principles are, you'll see them in the information you have that says a statement of common purpose, but the main focus of the principles is what do we want? We want to be sure that everyone in this country is covered, that the coverage is affordable to people, the coverage has benefits which meet our needs, that there's strong regulation of the private insurance industry, that everyone has access to a public insurance plan so we're not stuck with private insurance, that it's affordable to employers, that there's measures to be sure that access and equity to communities of color and people of color in terms of health care, and that we have the kind of cost controls that promote quality. Those are the basic principles of this campaign. And the campaign will work to bring those principles into the political debate, not tied to any particular plan, not tied to any particular approach here or there, but to say, as long as you do these things, make sure that our health care is everyone's covered with good coverage, that's affordable, that is comprehensive, that we're moving to create equity in the health care system, and that you have a choice of a public plan, so you're not just stuck with private insurance. As long as we're moving towards those principles, we can move together. We'll do this in a comprehensive way with 360-degree communication, so that from the traditional earned media to the new media to paid media together with a message and communication that takes the kind of traditional grassroots organizing and amplifies it with the kind of grassroots urgency that has millions of people wear Livestrong bracelets. We'll do it by being sure that policymakers understand what we want and opinion leaders understand what we want, and that members of Congress understand what we want. And it's not just, this election is not just around health care. This election is around a clear distinction between those of us who believe that the government has a fundamental obligation to guarantee quality, affordable health care for all, and those who would leave us alone to fend for ourselves in the private insurance market. We need to make the election not just about health care being one of the #1 issues, but a clear demand for the electorate that we want the government to play a role in guaranteeing us a fundamental guarantee of quality, affordable health care for all of us. And we'll do this from the ground up. And if you look at the founding groups of the organization, and now those who are in the steering committee, you'll see these are the leading organizations in this country that organize people for justice, whether they're community organizations like U.S. Action and the Center for Community Change and ACORN, with organizations in the labor movement, such as the AFL-CIO and SEIU and AFSCME, organizations at the Netroots, Move On, and groups like True Majority, that are part of U.S. Action, and women's groups, Planned Parenthood Federation of America has just joined, and Women's Voices, Women's Vote, and Policy Group, the sponsor of this conference, Campaign for America's Future, that is doing the leading policy work in making clear that we have policies and communication around what we're looking for. And this is the beginning. We have many other organizations, Small Business Majority up here today, which has done innovative work in California. We'll hear about organizing small businesses, vital in terms of healthcare reform. The campaign is just forming. We only announced it a couple weeks ago in terms of starting to ask people to join. We haven't done a public announcement yet. There's not a website yet. But those of you who represent organizations, you have information on this, and please do join us as we build this and unfold this in a major way on the national stage the next few months. So I'm going to stop there so you can start hearing from the members of the campaign about the work we're each doing. I'm not going to read long bios because you have those in your packet, but we're going to start with Barb Selfel from AFSCME. Barb is the Assistant Director of Legislation, and as I said, my pleasure being one of the co-chairs of our steering committee. Barb?
Thank you, Richard. My name's Barb Selfel, and I come from AFSCME. And for those of you who don't know, that's the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We're a union of 1.4 million members across the country. We also have 230-some thousand seniors who've joined retiree chapters around the country as well. Most of our members are in state and local government, but we also represent folks who work in the nonprofit area in healthcare and Head Start and other educational institutions, child care providers, home care providers, sort of a broad range of America. Everyone in this room understands the challenges that we face in winning meaningful and comprehensive healthcare reform. And I think all of us are looking forward to having really an historic fight here. All of us feel, I think, that we've got a real opportunity here to finally accomplish something that we've tried to accomplish for decades. But it's obvious to us at AFSCME that we alone cannot win this fight. And it's obvious to us at AFSCME that the labor movement alone cannot win this fight. So it's obvious that we need to work with lots of other organizations, lots of other groups in partnership and to build a movement. Our efforts together will be greater than the efforts of all of us individually. And that's because there's synergy when we coordinate our tactics and we coordinate our message. And it's this synergy of working together that will heighten the impact of all of our work. There's also efficiency in working together and sharing our resources. We do hope to grow this coalition, and I think that our presence and our capacity will become a vital resource for lots of other organizations. I know that there are lots of groups that are smaller. They don't have quite the same megaphone or expertise in healthcare or perhaps the same capacity to be heard in a loud way. But by working with us, we can sort of envelop them in our resources and help them be heard and become a vital voice in this debate in their own communities. AFSCME is also interested in working in this coalition, as Richard mentioned, because we're centering our work around principles. And these principles are progressive principles. We believe that there is more than one way to achieve reform, but an acceptable plan has to meet certain standards. And Richard has outlined sort of what our standards are. You know, key for us is that one of our principles is that we have a publicly administered, managed, operated healthcare plan that is an alternative to healthcare that is managed by the private insurance industry. So that's very important to us. Obviously, there are other keys. Our members care a lot about affordability. They care about having everybody else covered. They care about making reforms in the private market system so that we're not just dumping a lot of money into a system that we already know is deeply flawed. And if sort of drawing upon our recent experience, are there folks here from California by chance? Okay. You know, there was, as you know, a fight in California over enacting state legislation. And we took an approach of working in California based around principles that we have. And ultimately, in California, we decided to support the governor's plan. And, you know, I'm not going to tell you that it was an easy decision. It was a close call deciding that we would get on board. It was by no means perfect, but we felt that it was a positive step forward. And we sort of based it, again, along this notion of creating a public plan as an option. Ultimately, though, while we've been active in fights at the state level, we think that the real fight has to be at the federal level. The bottom line is that states do not have frequently the capacity to enact real reforms. You know, most states have requirements that in their constitution that they balance their budgets every year. And that creates an awful situation, especially during bad times in the economy. That means a state would have to slash and burn, frankly, its healthcare program, its healthcare system, if it were enacted in the state, if there was a downturn in the economy and revenues fell. So we feel that it's vitally important that really the primary effort be addressed at the federal level. Getting back to sort of why we joined and why we're part of this coalition, you know, we believe that this particular group of progressive allies can build momentum for reform, and that without this effort that we're putting together, our chances of doing that really are diminished. We think that labor union members can be a core of the effort. I mean, we like to think in the labor movement that we're organized, and for the most part we are organized, and we can talk to our members and they can form sort of the core of the activity that we will need to build for healthcare reform. We talk to our members a lot about healthcare. Every time they go to the bargaining table, they have a fight with their employers over healthcare. So they know the challenge that is faced in the future with healthcare reform. They see the costs rising. But they have good coverage, and they fought for it. They gave up pay raises to keep their good coverage. But they understand that it's not sustainable. They understand that ultimately there has to be something changed in our system in order for them to continue to hold on to the benefits they have and to be able to afford coverage. So our members are already sort of an educated group. We plan to do more education. And they, I think, will become a core of the activity that this coalition will conduct over the course of the next couple years. But like I said, while we form the core, we need a lot of other partners to work with us, and that's why we're really pleased to be part of this coalition effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. And next we'll be joined by Marvin Randolph, who's the Director of Organization and Politics. Did I get that right? Organizing and Politics? Yeah. Organizing and Politics, of course, for the Center for Community Change. Marvin?
So I work for the Center for Community Change, and we are, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, a 40-year organization. We've worked with, I would say, we currently work with over 364 grassroots partners across the country, real people and real communities dealing with real issues every day, engaged in a number of fights. We have divisions around our healthcare work, our immigration work, which we've been very involved in, around worker justice, around education, around housing, and we've been involved in a number of fights around the issues of poverty for the last 40 years. But what I want to talk to you about is really what this coalition is seeking to do and what some of the real challenges are that are before us. I think we all realize that that we have this huge moment in history in front of us. It is an incredibly great. It's a great likelihood that we are going to get some type of comprehensive health care passed in the next cycle, and folks are excited about that. But what that health care policy is a very important thing to consider. And we're all absolutely united in the fight for comprehensive health care, but we have to get coverage not just for some, but coverage for what is truly all. And, and by all I mean we have to address what is the who's in the group of people that we're getting coverage for. One of the things that we're very proud to be a part of this coalition and that serves as a principle is that we've talked in a way that is a manner of inclusion. The groups that the center work with include several communities of color, African Americans, immigrant communities of all stripes, also low-wage white communities that are wrestling with issues of poverty, Native American communities. And so when we talk about healthcare, the challenge is dealing with the knotty issues along the way, like the ones that we can't run away from. I think we all followed what happened in the S-chip fight for the Children's Health Insurance Program, where immigration was thrown into debate as a wedge issue. And so I think the real challenge before us is, how do we deal with racial disparity around health care? How do we deal with the tough issues about how we address immigration and immigrants in the conversation about health care? And how do we have the courage to not run away from that discussion, which is what this group has done through sort of what our policy has been, again, about a history of inclusion and how we talk about how we plan the healthcare debate. Or what we at the center like to call community values, which is the concept that we are all in this together, or as King said, that we're all in one beloved community, and that it's about striving to build healthcare for, not just healthcare for more, but healthcare for all. And so I want to talk a little bit about what the center's role is and what it is that we and our partners will bring to the table in this effort. Our healthcare program started as a series of learning circles, groups working on statewide healthcare, in I'd say over a dozen states or so. We started with those 12. We are growing to 100 groups across the nation, which also connected to several other partners and affiliates. That's a little bit about the breadth of the community groups we work with, and we're expanding that 100 into a larger section of the 360 or so organizations that we're dealing with across the nation. What's unique about it is some of the approaches. We've had a lot of success working with many of our partners at the table, dealing with small businesses and some of the things that they wrestle with healthcare. in states like Washington, Michigan, Idaho, South Carolina, where we've brought small businesses to the legislation to talk to the press, to a big presidential event that we did at the center called the Heartland Presidential Forum in Iowa. And those voices made a tremendous difference as we sort of impacted how legislators or decision makers were thinking about healthcare, because these were businesses championing the very issues that we were fighting for. We're also working to bring new voices to the table. I won't go through a litany of groups, but there are big networks like, church networks that are out there. Gamaliel, which is a church network, PICO, which is a church network that we're in conversation with about trying to bring them into this table so we can have a broader circle of inclusion. The center's had a great history in the movement. We are engaged in a number of broad-based coalitions, and the role that we play as a, sort of a facilitator or an aggregator of power with community groups. We have the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, which has hundreds of groups that are committed to immigration reform. We're part of the marches and that are now engaged in the healthcare fight. The We Are America Alliance, which is a civic engagement arm of the immigrant rights movement, and the Campaign for Comprehensive Immigration Reform, which is sort of basing some of the legislative stuff. And so, again, I just want to leave you with what I think is the real important thing for us to think about as we sort of address what we think is the challenge or the road, as speed bumps that we'll have ahead. And that is that there will be wedge issues that will be out there, and if we try to run away from those, we won't spend the time to make our case about what healthcare for all means. We won't spend the time to be able to be prepared for the tough questions when they come. And there's several groups from several different stripes and several different communities that are very committed to this fight. And so we're happy to be here. We're proud to be a part of this coalition and sitting with folks at the table, and look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Those of you who remember some of the painful details of what happened in 1994 may remember that the crucial vote in Congress was at the House Commerce Committee, where John Dingell was trying to get legislation through that would move health care reform, and really the organization by small business against any kind of requirement that they pay even a little bit, 1 or 2% for health care, was used to effectively stop that. This time we're going to be prepared, and one of the folks that's helping us prepare that is John Arensmeyer from Small Business Majority. John?
Thank you, Richard. I guess I'm the only person with a PowerPoint here, so give me one sec. It's worked before. Oops. Oops, well. It's calming down. Okay, here we go. All right. Well, yes, as Richard indicated, and we're going to talk a little bit about, small business is absolutely an essential component to achieving healthcare reform at the state or national level. And as we're going to talk about briefly, there are a lot of reasons why small business should be and is a natural ally in the movement. I'm going to sort of talk about 4 different topics. One is that small business is an essential ally. 2, that healthcare reform is absolutely necessary to ensure small business success. We're going to talk about the fact that indeed, research and the work that we've done so far shows that small business properly organized does support healthcare reform, and talk a little bit about our plans for this year and going forward. So on the issue of small business being an essential ally for healthcare reform, I want to take a moment to make it clear how, most people don't realize this, even small business owners don't realize this, how large a sector small business is in this country. It really is the backbone of the American economy. There are 27 million small businesses in the United States. They represent employ 52% of the private sector workforce, create 75% of net new jobs, are really the source of most innovation. It's pretty incredible that there are 14 times as many patents created in small businesses as there are in large businesses. And sole proprietors, which are a really growing part of the small business community due to changes in technology, represent 9% of the private sector workforce. And just to put that in perspective, in the private sector workforce, that's greater than the number of employees who are unionized. So, I mean, we have to start with the full understanding that this is a huge piece of the puzzle and a huge piece of the economy. As I alluded to, the 21st century economy is only creating more opportunity for the growth of the small business sector. And in fact, if we really want to talk about middle class prosperity and security in this country, we cannot ignore the small business sector. Finally, and Richard made the very point I was going to make, the healthcare reform will fail if small businesses are not only if they're not only opposing it, but if they're not active participants in moving it forward. I want to share a little bit of research that Celinda Lake did for the Herndon Alliance, which I think is really interesting. And a lot of this was unsolicited. There were not a set of questions about small businesses. And voluntarily, and these are regular voters, so we're talking about a constituency that goes beyond the small business constituency that we have to get on board. In fact, the average voter has a very iconic feeling about small business and the role that they play in our society. And in fact, voters say that they will oppose healthcare reform if they think that it is detrimental to small business. And amazingly, this came in only second to immigration as a potential impediment to healthcare reform. So again, we're talking about something that goes beyond the small business constituency and really affects voters in general. And finally, the participants in these focus groups said, what's good for small business must be articulated by small business owners. It's not sufficient that other healthcare advocates articulate this. So that's why we're hoping through our work and through getting other business organizations on board that we can really create organic small business voices in favor of healthcare reform. Second point I want to make is that healthcare reform is absolutely essential for small business success and prosperity. It's the single biggest problem facing small business. This shows up in survey after survey. Small business healthcare costs have gone up 125% since 1999. It is just a huge problem. In fact, and this is the case we make, because as we've all said, and as David Sirota said in a panel yesterday, we have to really appeal to people's self-interest to get them on board. And it is the reason it's an impediment. It's this huge roadblock standing in the way of people going out and starting small businesses and growing small businesses. So here we are in this nation of entrepreneurism, roll up your sleeves, go out and make it on your own, and yet we put up this huge roadblock that has nothing to do with a business's product, with their energy, with their marketing, with their desire, and therefore it really does undermine entrepreneurism to not have healthcare reform, and it truly undermines the true free market that we should be caring about. So as a result of this, we start from the premise that small business is a natural ally in the fight for comprehensive healthcare reform. I want to make a quick point because there's a lot of misconception about small business political affiliations. I think it's important to understand this. This is research that we did, national research that we did. And yes, indeed, there are a few more Republican small business owners than Democrat small business owners. For those of you who can't see, it's 23% Democrat, 30% Republican, but 41% said that they consider themselves independent. So this is an even greater percentage of independents than you find in the general population. That shouldn't be any surprise. Small business owners tend to be mavericks, tend to not really like aspects of the existing system. But two points I want to make here. One is that small business owners are not overwhelmingly more Republican than Democrat, and two, most small businesses don't identify with either party, which we see as an opportunity to bring small business owners on board. Finally, I want to talk about the fact that small business really does truly want to play a constructive role and talk a little bit about our work in California. First of all, before I get to that, the national survey that I talked about where we got those other numbers, you just look at some of these statistics. That 87% ranked healthcare as extremely or very important, that 63% supported a government-sponsored healthcare solution. And again, as has been said on this panel and in other panels here at this conference, a key point that we have to achieve is we have to get people to understand that government must work as a partner to solve a lot of problems, including healthcare. And that is sort of a major ideological hurdle that we have to overcome. But small business owners are so frustrated that even though they may be opposed to government intervention in certain areas, they're ready for the government to come in and say, we want to work with you. 81% favored access to purchasing pools, and 60% were in favor of mandating that all companies provide health insurance. So we sort of started off with this research and said, wow, these are pretty stark statistics that kind of fly in the face of conventional wisdom. So last year we formed a coalition in California, which we called Small Business for Affordable Health Care. And the first thing we did was we conducted a scientific survey of small business owners across the state. And here are just a couple of the key findings. 75% rated healthcare as extremely or important or very important. 80% felt that employers should have to pay to provide healthcare to their employees. And 57% saw healthcare as the shared responsibility of government, businesses, and individuals. That was 3 times as many who did not. The rest were neutral. 55% favored paying into we asked the theoretical question, do you favor paying into a statewide pool that would enable employees to obtain coverage at favorable rates? And again, 55% yes versus only 17% who said no. Now, when we then put some of the existing proposals that were pending in California at the time on the table, we got a slightly different response. We still got support. This was at a time, for those of you who follow the debate, there were basically two competing proposals, and we did this survey before there ended up being a compromise. But the leading legislative proposal proposed that if businesses didn't pay 7.5% of payroll for health insurance, that they would have to pay that into a fund, which would then allow their employees to purchase insurance at subsidized rates. And again, we had a 47 to 33 in favor of this. And again, this is not our membership. This is small businesses across the state. And in fact, when we asked them about single payer, it was pretty even, 42-40 in favor of single payer. So what we came away from this, and I actually want to show a couple crosstabs and then kind of give you the summary. There was only like a 1 to 7% swing in responses based, depending on the question, between people who offered insurance and didn't offer insurance. 40% of the people surveyed offered insurance, 60% did not, which kind of matches up with businesses under 10 employees. The size of the business, there was negligible difference. Again, understand most of the businesses who responded were under 10 employees. And there was a difference in type of business. Retail and low margin type businesses were slightly less likely to support reform. So we came away from this saying, business owners are practical. They want a solution. They're not as ideological as they're portrayed to be. And they're really willing to be part of the solution. Very quickly, what we did in California is we got extensive media coverage out of these research results. We started to build the organization there. And interestingly, we created an environment, or helped create an environment, where other business organizations came on board. Not to get into a lot of detail about the California situation, but even though it failed, there actually was a pretty amazing coalition that was built, and it did include major chambers of commerce in 4 major metropolitan areas across the state, another statewide small business organization, and there were other chambers of commerce we talked to who were ready to come on board if there'd been more time to build support among their membership. So they're really having this research, having this outreach effort really did create an environment to get business support for healthcare reform. I want to quickly just talk about our plans for 2008 and beyond. We're taking Small Business for Affordable Healthcare national, and we've teamed up with the Herndon Alliance to have a national organization, Small Business for Affordable Healthcare. And I'm going to just go through 8 quick things that we're going to be doing. First, we're starting to build a national infrastructure. And actually jumping to number 4, the core of this is going to be state chapters that are organic state chapters run and managed by small business owners in the state in cooperation with healthcare advocates in the state. But there needs to be a national infrastructure to stitch all this together so that when it comes time to have a national debate, we've got a coordinated set of business voices. That's going to include a national communications campaign, taking a lot of the successful communications that we did in California and extending it nationally, creating a strong national online system for small business owners to link into. Again, I talked about the creation of state chapters. We're going to be disseminating materials and providing training. We're going to be working in concert with Community Catalysts and others to do that, to provide training to and again, a lot of the outreach we're doing to groups are going to be to groups at the state level, but it's going to be done sort of as part of this national infrastructure. Key to this is building partnerships with other business organizations and with healthcare advocates. We've done that in California. We're doing that now nationally. We're part of the healthcare coalition that Richard's been talking about, and other coalitions as well. We're going to continue to do research, because not only does it give us information about how we should be messaging about what's important, but it also is a great communications tool, as we found in California, and it does a lot to blunt a lot of the information that comes from the other side. And finally, we are going to be hopefully commissioning academic studies to study the economic impact on small businesses of healthcare reform, and how that would benefit small businesses going forward. We're definitely going to be doing that in California, and we hope to expand that nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, we're going to hear from someone who has got, I think, probably the best title of anybody here in the whole conference. What is that? Khalid Pitts from SEIU. SEIU represents 1 million healthcare workers, and his title is Director of Political Accountability. Khalid?
Thank you, Richard. My title, unfortunately, does not come with a club, though. Well, good morning, everyone here. Oh, there we go. There we go. You know, I'm going to try to be brief, because I think it's less important, in a sense, that you hear from us as we actually hear from you out there. So I'm looking forward to a question and answer period here. As Richard said, I work for SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. For those of you who don't know who SEIU is, we are the largest labor union in North America. We represent 2 million workers, 1 million of which you've heard, are healthcare workers. I bring you greetings from our President, Andy Stern, and our Secretary-Treasurer, Anna Berger, who will be speaking on Wednesday afternoon. Just a little bit more about SEIU. We kind of talk about who we represent. We represent people in the service industry, you know, property service workers, people who are security guards, people who work in janitorial services. We represent people in the public sector, much like our brothers and sisters that would ask me, who work for state governments. Could be child care workers, could be home care workers, could be Head Start workers, could be a dietitian at a school, or a woman who's serving your child lunch at his or her elementary school. And then, as Richard said, we represent 1 million and growing healthcare workers from across this country, from Florida to California to Ohio to New York State, and we're very proud of that. You know, earlier today before I got here, I was listening to Barack Obama's speech today on race, this big major speech he was giving on race. And then Richard and John both, I think actually Richard and folks up here both evoked the name of Martin Luther King, and come up in a few weeks will be the 4th anniversary of his death. And you think about that election in '68, election of somewhat turmoil, election of great change in the world and in this country. It feels like we're in that same kind of sense. You know, we're in an election of change. Something's going to happen. You know, people are a bit tired, whether you're Republican or Democrat or Independent. This is going to be an election of change, and I think voters are going to go to the polls this year voting. They want to see something different. They want to see a different economy. They want to see a change in what we're doing in our foreign policy in our war in Iraq. And they particularly want to see a change in our healthcare structure. You know, how do you access good healthcare? How do you pay for it? And how do you guarantee great quality healthcare? Something our union, and particularly our union members, are very key on. So, and you know, we heard from Barb earlier, our brothers and sisters asked me of why we joined this labor union. Joined this coalition. And it was interesting. Jeff Blum, the executive director of U.S. Action, who I would kind of credit to being kind of the brainchild pulling this coalition together. He spent many a time on the telephone, and I think probably staying up late at night, thinking about who should belong in this coalition. It has to be broad and diverse, but it also has to mean anything. And one of the things that he called us up at SEU and called our brothers and sisters over at ASME and said that we needed the 2 largest labor unions in this country, unions that represent millions of workers, unions that represent a diverse set of workers, workers in the healthcare field, to come together and see if we can find common ground to build a coalition, because it's going to take a coalition. As Barb said, AFSCME can't do it alone. You know, certainly SAU can't do it alone. You know, you think about the resources we have, and you know, we spent $65 million in the 2004 election, and we're going to spend a lot of money in this election too. But we understood from that election that we can't do it alone. It's going to take our brothers and sisters in the labor movement. It's going to take our brothers and sisters in the advocacy community. It's going to take our brothers and sisters in the grassroots community to all come together behind a common bond if we want to see change. Because one thing you know, change is inevitable, you know, but progress is something we're all going to have to work at. And SUU, with our coalition partners, is something we're going to work at. And so, what are we going to do? Well, you've heard up here and seen representation of parts of that coalition, from the business community, from labor, from the grassroots community, from those in the advocacy community. Well, SU is going to bring its voices here, its voices and its resources. And I talk about the resources we spent in 2004, and you will be spending a lot of resources, as I said before, in this election too. But more than spending money, what does SCA do best, besides finding different shades of purple to wear? We organize. We didn't get to 2 million members by sitting on our butts. We got to 2 million members by talking to people, by talking to workers. So we're going to organize. We're going to organize in the business community. You heard from the small business group. We've been talking to, funny the world, you may have seen in the papers, we've been talking to the Fortune 500 companies. Andy Stern, our president, sent a letter to every head of every Fortune 500 company in this country and said, there are more things that join us together than separate us. We're willing to sit down at a table and talk with you about how do we change and make progress in our healthcare system. So it's good for you, good for the American business community, but also good for our workers and good for our economy. So we've sat down with, strangely enough, the Walmarts of the world. We've worked with our brothers and sisters in the labor movement to organize them, but we understand that without the business community, we can't have real change. Richard touched base about what happened in the 1990s and how real healthcare reform was undercut by the business community. Well, we've made it a point to say, we'll reach out to you and talk to you about how do we find common ground about effective changes in the healthcare system. We're reaching out beyond the business community to those providers like Kaiser, Aetna, and other providers, Greater New York Hospital System, in a sense, insurance companies to some large degree. Again, without you and having your voices at least heard, and let's see how far they go, we can't do this. But more importantly than that, we're talking to and we're organizing and we're mobilizing our members, our 2 million members across this country, but our 1 million members, our 1 million healthcare members who are first responders, who are nurses, who are home care workers, who are dietitians, who work in myriad positions in the healthcare industry to go out and not only speak among themselves, but speak to their coworkers. Speak to them about, hey, I'm a first responder. I want to talk to you about healthcare. I've got a good healthcare plan, but I know that this economy, this country, isn't in a better place unless you have a better health. You have access to healthcare, you have quality healthcare, and you have affordable healthcare. So our workers will be out there talking to other workers, will be out there talking to the general public about healthcare. And part of what we're going to be doing is launching later on next month is a national caravan for healthcare. That will be going to the battleground states. They'll be going to roughly 60 to 70 congressional districts with a caravan tour with our healthcare workers' voices, with the voices of other members on this panel and who aren't represented right here on this panel directly but are indirectly represented, to bring the issue of healthcare to the American people. Because we know in 68, if the voices of progressive change are silenced, we get regression. And as I said before, that change is inevitable, but progress is going to take hard work. And the organizations and the representatives representatives ahead of you right here, and I think even you out there are committed, I know, to put that hard work in. Because all of you, we're going to see not the change we want in next year. So I just want to leave you with that. I'm hoping and looking forward to a spirited conversation about how do we actually leave this room and we all have nice lunch and talking and getting energizing. How do we take the energy from the Take Back America conference and go back out there in our cities, in our towns, in our little hamlets, and talk about making effective change out there on the healthcare system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalid. We're honored by one more speaker before we have time for questions. Khalid talked about hard work for progress, and it's great that ACORN has joined the campaign because they have hard work for progress on a host of issues, and making the connection between all their traditional work on issues of low-income families struggling to have a quality of life and live with dignity to be entering the healthcare field is very exciting as a national organization. Since Marcella is kind enough to be pinch hitting for Sharon Stallings, who I guess had her own mild healthcare problem today, let me just say one word because her bio is not in the program. Marcella is the president of DC ACORN, and she's the co-chair of Move DC Health Committee. And the goal of that, I guess the District of Columbia took the word public out of their Department of Health, and they're trying to make it back into the Department of Public Health. And for 9 years, she's been an active member of ACORN. Marcel.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Marcel Reed. I am a member of DC ACORN, and as DC ACORN, we've been working for a very long time on matters that count across the board in our communities. ACORN is a large organization of 350,000 families throughout the country of low and moderate income people. And what we have specialized in over the years are a number of campaigns. Some of those will be familiar to those of you here in the room, from the foreclosure fight to paid sick days to living wage. We've worked on all of those campaigns, but all of those campaigns are impacted by health care in our communities. Lots of people who have found that their homes are being foreclosed on were duped into taking second mortgages to help pay off some of their health care bills. And that is something that affects them constantly. When we battle for paid sick days, we want to make sure that people do have paid sick days, but paid sick days implies that they can go to the hospital and receive some kind of services, or go to a doctor. Without health care services, we find that many of them don't have the option to do that, so their health conditions just become worse. We're happy to join with you in this Care Now, Healthcare for America Now campaign. It's something that we're very happy to help you with and to be involved in ourselves. Healthcare has been kind of a back burner issue in ACORN for years now. When we're at any of our large meetings, healthcare always bubbles up. There's always someone who says something to us about healthcare. We know that we are going to need a large coalition to fight for this. We're going to need lawyers. We're going to need people out of think tanks. We're going to need just a number of people to help with this. We're even looking for Hollywood people to come in and help us. You know, if you have any star or starlet out there that wants to stand up here on the podium and take shots and be a part of this movement, we're certainly looking forward to them helping as well. Everyone that I know has some nightmare story about health care. I don't care where I go or what group of people I'm around. If I talk to them long enough, somebody has some story about someone who did not get health care or doesn't have health care or is suffering and struggling from having paid the bills that were imposed by not having adequate health care. The lack of affordable health care is impacting so many of our members, Take the minimum wage. We worked a very long time across the country, and I know the battle here in the district, to get the living wage in place. So people here in the district make $11.75 an hour as our living wage. But that won't allow those people to purchase health care independently. And if their employer doesn't provide them with health care, they find that any economic gain they've made is quickly eroded, because the minute that they're hit with their first big health care related bill, all of their strides forward go back. And that's what we're battling about. In short, what we're trying to do is get people to join so that when we make one step forward, we don't make two steps back. And one of my personal issues is I call all of this work, all of this umbrella of work that we do, poverty tax. Poverty tax is the tax that poor people pay for every single good and service that is delivered to them because they have so much less to spend on it. So everything turns out to be some kind of tax. So if they go for health care or a loaf of bread or whatever it is, when you have very little money, everything is so much more than when you have a great deal of money, till it turns out to be a very strange kind of tax that's imposed only on the poorest people in the community. So what I try to work with are groups of people who are interested in fighting the poverty tax as well. So let's face it, this fight is going to be big, it's going to be ugly, it's going to be uphill, it's going to last a very long time. We're going to have to push aside all of our own battles and differences to get there. But we're very happy to be a part of this coalition. We will do whatever we have to do to make sure that health care is something that is offered to everyone in America. We want to make sure that we're part of that battle. We will do whatever we have to do. Thank you and thank you for joining us in fighting the poverty tax.
Thank you, Marcel. I want to thank all the speakers for being brief, which gives you time to ask questions, which is really what we're anxious to do. So Mike's here, and so people can hear you. So please step up, line up, and I can see how shy this group is. And we'll start with questions, and I'll MC it, but we'll all have a chance to answer as we wish. So go ahead and introduce yourself if you would, and fire away.
Yes, my name is Bob Rosenblatt. I'm a freelance writer. I'd like to ask the panel, if you can't get Medicare for all or some other version of single payer, would you accept either Senator Clinton's mandate, individual mandate on everyone, or Senator Obama's individual mandate on people who have children? Would you accept either of those as your second choice?
Well, let me start by answering that and see what other people want to add. The reason this campaign is formed around principles is because we don't want to equate it to just single payer, a single payer bill, a bill from whoever the next Democratic president is, wherever the next president is. We want to fight for a set of principles. So we're going to look at any plan and see, is it really affordable to families? Does it fit within families' income? That's what you pay to get into the system, co-payments, deductibles. Are there caps? Are the benefits really good? Do they really meet a family's health care needs, individuals' health care needs, from prevention to serious illness to mental illness to all the kind of things you need? Is the plan really going to promote equity for communities of color and people of color for the healthcare system that has real differences in outcomes for folks of color? Are we going to have the kind of really strong regulation of the private insurance industry to the extent that private insurance still plays a role, so that we're sure that the kind of exclusions and pre-existing conditions and incredible abuses that happen don't happen? Is there a public plan so that we don't just have private insurance, a public plan that guarantees affordable? So I'd say that it's, for us, the goal is not to say this plan or that plan. It's to say we'll look at any plan, and if it meets those goals, we'll support it. We'll push every plan to meet those goals. Anything folks want to add to that? Okay, next question.
My name is Kenneth Kovac. I'm a member of the Steelworkers Organization of Active Retirees. and a co-member with Barbara of the AFL-CIO Healthcare Task Force. I'm very pleased to listen to the panel, but my question goes toward John Arensmeyer. I know that coming out of the labor movement, the folks that are in the labor movement are working with their retirees. And at my age, I am particularly interested in retirees, and I wondered if at this time and stage in your organization, are you doing anything with the retired business community to move this plan forward?
Our focus is on the small business majority and small business for affordable health care on existing small business owners. However, we're actually, we partner with an organization called Business for Shared Prosperity, headed by Chuck Collins, and they are, retired executives are a component of that program.
Thank you. Go ahead, next.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Jerzak. I'm the National Political and Legislative Director of the California Nurses Association. Nice to see some of the faces that were responsible for the California bill that went down to justified defeat. Just an observation that if the California plan is tied to the Democratic candidate, he's done. If anybody's going out and say you have to buy health care insurance from private insurance companies, they're finished. The stupidest Republican candidate can beat you on that one. All right, so if you're sincere about trying to move this, please stay away from forcing people to buy health care insurance. All right, insurance companies don't deliver health care. They deliver payment to health care providers. That's all they do. They don't tend to one patient. They don't give one injection. They don't perform one operation. Now, if we said to you in the public sector, you know, we ought to let some kind of private sector companies perform some of the administrative tasks that public employees do, just to keep everybody straight. Now, that's a mantra from the Republican Party, right? So we don't see why we need private insurers administering payment of this stuff. The other question I would have is why we don't have equality of care as one of our principles here. You know, you talk about affordable care. To me, I would paint this as meaning some people get what's affordable at this level, well, these folks over here who pay for a higher premium or for some other thing, they get better care. If we're going to have universal health care under whatever mantra, I would suggest and I would hope that the group would consider equality of care as part of this.
Okay. All right, thank you. So let me say, first of all, we do have, in effect, equality of care as a principle. The principle is that every plan has to have comprehensive benefits. In fact, so we've made it very clear that we're not talking about two levels of care. We're talking about a strong level of care in every single plan. And we've also talked about strong regulation of private insurance and being sure there's a public insurance plan. In fact, the estimates are that there'll be about 100 million people in this public insurance plan. When you add that to Medicare, it's about half the population of the country in a public insurance plan. So we think it's a major achievement that way and a major step towards having that kind of coverage. Barb, you want to add something?
Yeah, just very briefly. At AFSCME, our perspective is that there is more than one way to get comprehensive healthcare reform. There are some standards that we think need to be applied, and these principles address those standards. But we are approaching this with a little bit broader mind than perhaps we have in the past in trying to achieve healthcare reform. And we're thinking about it in more than, that there is more than one way to get there. And so I'll just leave my comment at that.
Anyone else?
No, just to speak to the issue of, accessibility. I think one thing you talked about, and you see representatives from ACORN and Center for Community Change who represent, millions of people who communities of color. I think for this this coalition, the point about healthcare disparities, not only disparities in terms of race, but disparities in terms of access to comprehensive healthcare is something that's very important, not only to this coalition, but I would say to each and every member setting up here. And, oops, sorry about that. And to kind of echo what Barb said, I think we've all heard the term, not letting the perfect destroy the good. I think we're going to this with, as Barb said, with a broad mind. We've talked to our members, we've talked to our leaders out there from a number of different states, and I think we're looking to build something that that America can get behind, and all of America, truly uniting America behind a quality, affordable, and accessible healthcare system.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Miles Bogulescu. I write for the Huffington Post, including on healthcare, and I chaired the panel yesterday with Representative John Conyers and Courtney Farr from the California Nurses Association about the single-payer approach. The first thing I want to say is I think there are really two lines of division. One is we, all of us, you, the people who support a private-public hybrid, and those of us who support single-payer are more on one side than the Republicans who don't support a significant government role in healthcare reform. So I think we are part of one family, and I want to make that absolutely clear. But there are also differences within our family, and there already is a large coalition that's been building for many years around universal health care, and particularly around single-payer health care, and John Conyers 646. That includes many, many labor unions, community organizations, churches. So there already is a coalition, and you're coming in with a new and somewhat different coalition that somewhat overlaps. And I think there's a real danger, and we saw it in California over the Schwarzenegger-Nunez bill, of the progressive movement dividing between supporters of a public-private hybrid and supporters of single-payer health care. And the Schwarzenegger California One Care, which helped pass Sheila Kuehl's single-payer health care bill, which passed both houses of the California legislature and was vetoed by Governor Schwarzenegger, but was also influential in blocking the Schwarzenegger-Nunez compromise. And it was blocked. SEIU, I know, supported it. AFSCME supported it, but a number of other California labor unions and other important community organizations opposed it. And it didn't get out of the, it got out of the state senate with only one vote in support of it. So I think there's a real danger here that there's going to be a real division within the progressive movement, but between those supporting a public-private hybrid, which, in my opinion, doesn't really work. It is not the perfect supplanting the good, but the deeply inferior and flawed supporting the good, which I think was the Schwarzenegger-Nunez bill. And I really want people to speak about how do we avoid, on the one hand, dividing the progressive movement while recognizing that there are real differences within the progressive movement.
So I'm going to take a first cut of a couple other answers, and then I'm also going to ask folks, just because of time, to try to keep our questions shorter, just because I'm sure everybody has a chance before it's over. So I just want to say that I think we need I want to answer the main question, but I want a frank discussion about what really works and what's deeply flawed. We need to understand we have something that really works for America, a frank view of the single payer in the United States. Medicare would talk about inadequate benefits, unaffordability in Medicare. Realize that we have to focus on what really matters to people, which is affordability, which is comprehensive benefits. There's lots of things Medicare hasn't done positively in terms of access and better management of care. Let's have a frank conversation about what makes healthcare works for America. That's what we want to do. In terms of unity, which I think is really the important thing you're asking about, there's a tremendous amount, as you said, that unites us. First of all, as you said, there's an enormous divide in this country between our view, which is a guarantee of quality, affordable health care for all, and their view, which is to leave you alone to fend with the insurance industry. What will unite us is along those lines. We will be doing an extraordinary amount in this campaign to make it clear to people that the health insurance industry is not on their side, and those who think that we can have a private solution based on high deductible plans, tax credits, no regulation, will basically fail our country, our families. And that's what I think we'll find unity on. And I think that as we actually get into the real political debate that's going to happen in this country this year and hopefully next year in healthcare, that we'll find tremendous unity on our side around that. So other people want to comment, and then we got other people questioning, and I'm being told we have only a few minutes left in the session. Anything else? Okay, let's try to make these questions really fast just so the four of you can get a chance before Melinda kicks us out of here.
Okay.
And we have one other person sitting I'm going to ask, and then so let's make it fast. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is George Wong. I'm Executive Vice President for United Healthcare Workers West in California, specifically Kaiser Division, San Francisco. And I want to thank the panel for taking up the debate on universal health care. As you well know, as everybody knows, that our universal health care attempt in California pretty much failed, but we're still continuing to move on. And I'm very, very gratified that our international brothers and sisters are taking up the coalition effort to come back to the battleground states. I will offer perhaps maybe just a few tidbits of advice, since we in UHW have done a long fight in California, is that I think the unity issue is very important, and divisions within labor unions is not going to be fruitful. So I would ask that in the other battleground states that you're going to, please look toward the local unions that have been organizing on the ground, because they pretty much know the demographics and the politics, and to develop those relationships in those battleground states. And one last thing, and I agree with the issue about, we were kind of opposed to, really still opposed to mandated insurance, but if it's going to happen, then you really need health insurance reform in the industry, because as everyone knows, they're in the business of selling, they're not in the business of selling you health care insurance that you need, it's the health care insurance that you can afford. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we'll take your advice. Next.
My name is Michael Phillips. I'm the author of the book Boycott Money and Save Your Soul. I'm very pleased to see this coalition, because I've been very disappointed with the anti-war movement, because I think they needed to have formed a stronger coalition, because that's where the real power is. There's the risk of division, even within tight groups. So in a coalition, I think we need to be vigilant that divisions really don't occur, and I like the general framework in which this healthcare has been framed rather than a specific plan. And in terms of coalition, I have a recommendation that incorporating Warren Buffett and Bill Gates into that coalition. In recent years, we see them heading out and helping out in AIDS and this type of thing. And there's a group called Responsible Wealth. We tend to see wealthy people in stereotypes too. And I think the time is ripe to reach out to those two. And if we got those two in it, I think half our battle would be won. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Flavio Casoy with the American Medical Student Association, here representing 68,000 of the nation's future physicians. And we joined this coalition, and we're happy to have joined because we believe in a larger role for government in healthcare financing. But I want to press the panel further on the question of the role of private health insurance. Because from our evidence, which is the best evidence, and our experience in the clinics, we know that by definition, private health insurance is exclusionary. For them to survive, they need to take in premiums and not pay in healthcare. So once we win these principles, how are we going to make sure we can actually build a system that works for our patients? Because we believe whenever there is private health insurance still in the mix, the system is going to be exclusionary and divided. So can you please talk more about what's the next step here? Because winning the principles are not enough to win a healthcare system that works for our patients.
You want to take it? Barb, John?
I'll just quickly say, I mean, again, I think we want to try to stay away from ideological labels as much as possible. And at the end of the day, whether it's private or public, isn't as important as what is it accomplishing? Are there rules around it? It's possible to have private industry that is regulated, which is a key component of guaranteed affordable health care, all the plans that are out there. It was a key component of the California plan as well. In fact, let me just say something quickly about the California plan, because it's been brought up quite a bit. It was incredibly comprehensive. It was amazingly comprehensive. And the groups, the coalition that was formed, I talked about some of the business groups, but I mean, most of the labor unions, most of the healthcare advocates, most of the insurance industry, as well as the business groups I talked about. It did fail for political reasons that we don't have time to go into, but the fact is that we should be pragmatically looking at what does a proposal or legislation accomplish, and try to stay away from whether it's private, whether it's public, who might be getting a little more than somebody else, because that's kind of the The other side tends to make heavily ideological arguments. I think we're going to be more successful if we stay away from that.
Others?
Just very briefly, I think, one of the key components of healthcare reform, as long as there is private industry involved, is to have a very strong role by the government as watchdog. And we have to increase the ability of our federal government and state governments also to be able to regulate the insurance industry so they can't cheat people out of health care that they've paid for. Also, I think that with a strong public plan as an option, you create an alternative for people. And I think to some degree that alternative will help hold the private insurance industry accountable and help keep them honest in the way that they operate. Because if they don't operate well, people will have a better option.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here today. My name is Katie. I'm with Healthcare Now, which of course is the grassroots national campaign for HR 676 single payer health plan. And a lot of the questions that I had have been touched on. Single payer has been, it's endorsed by the California State Legislature. Of course, it's getting huge support around the country. And I really hope that we can work together because the single payer plan supports all of the points except for the topics that you bring up in joining with the private insurance companies. So I think that since this is a movement that exists now, to prevent division within the movement towards universal quality health care, I really look forward to working with all of you in the future for this.
We look working with all of you, and I know that our organization and most of the organizations here have endorsed single payer. We're not going to work exclusively for it, but we do think, again, we're really in the same family here. We have the last question from the gentleman behind you, and then we'll thank everyone for joining us today.
Hi, my name's Steve Scavera. I'm with SOAR. Back in August, I made a little splash about health care. Fundamentally, I've received so much information from so many people, both physicians and people who have problems with insurance. Number one, to say that the insurance companies are voluntarily going to reduce their profits is ludicrous. You're living in la-la land.
We agree.
To go from 30% profit down to 15%, one of the biggest insurance companies said, we don't care how we look on Main Street, it's how we look on Wall Street. It's the bottom line. Do you think you're going to form a partnership with a group like that wants to cut your throat?
Nope.
It doesn't work.
We don't think so either.
The other thing is I've talked to a lot of physicians, including my own, and through Medicare, thank God, I've got some good physicians, some of the best specialists in the Midwest. And my cardiologist, out of the clear blue, before I made the headline, sat there one day and looked at me and said, we need to go to a single-payer healthcare system. And I looked at him in shock and said, why? From you do I hear this? He said, because I'm paying more now for billing than I pay for malpractice. Over $250,000 a year for billing. And then he explained to me why. The battle he has with every insurance company trying to get one bill paid.
Well, we agree, and as we keep saying, we're going to be making it really clear to this country that the system that's based in private insurance isn't one that can benefit this country, and we're going to work to be sure that we get quality, affordable health care for everyone, and we look forward to working with all of you the next year to do that. Thank you.